Hello, everybody. It's Thursday, October 3rd, and Chapo is coming at you. And just at the top of the show, once again, I'd like to plug Matt Christman's book. Buy the book, people. Buy the book. You know what to do. No pasaran, Matt Christman's Civil War. Available for pre-order until October
Matt Christman's
31st.
Spanish Civil War.
Oh, right. Fuck. No, Matt Christman's No Pasaran, Matt Christman's Spanish Civil War, available to order only until October 31st. So buy early and often. You only have this month to do so. And also our Election Eve live show with E1 in Los Angeles. Tickets available. Link in the show description. All right. So for today's show, world events have once again interceded to fuck with our program and my life and schedule. Due to events currently unfolding in the Middle East, we will not be discussing the new season of Tulsa King, unfortunately. So I apologize for that. So we're going to have to talk about some real shit going down. Well, Tulsa King will just have to wait.
Here's how I think you should have done that. Tulsa King on the back burner, but Tulpa King on the rise? Are Israelis making tulpas of themselves?
So, of course, today we're going to be talking about...
I just think it would have worked.
Today, obviously, we were talking about Israel, Lebanon, Iran. And to do so, we are joined, of course, by our good friend, Brother Séamus. It's Séamus Malekafzali, back again, senior for Chapo, Lebanon and Middle East correspondent. Séamus Malekafzali. Séamus, welcome back to the show.
Always a pleasure to be back on.
I'd like to begin with the ballistic missile attack that Iran launched against Israel earlier this week. And Séamus, I want to start with this because it's this is Iran's, what I would describe as a totally proportionate and reasonable response to the assassination of Haniyeh in their own country. They launched, according to Iran, something like 180 ballistic missiles at a number of Israeli Air Force bases. And I guess I'd like to begin because in trying to assess what actually took place, there's quite a bit of competing information about exactly what happened in this missile attack. Because Iran is claiming that most of their missiles that they fired of their hypersonic Fatah variety missile, which they have not used thus far in this war, Iran has claimed that something like 90% of them hit their targets. Israel is claiming the exact opposite. So, Séamus, as best you understand, what can we tell about the relative, strategic success or failure of this missile attack on Israeli Air Force bases?
Well, there are two different ways to measure strategic success. One is the Israeli one during this current war, and one is the current Iranian one. The current Iranian one, as it is with the rest of the acts of resistance, is to, show the ability to overcome Israel's defenses, to show its resolve, to show its abilities, to indicate that if there are more moves against Iranian territory in the future, that the next strikes will be against more targets that Israel will not be able to shoot down. According to Israel, however, success is measured by whether or not Tel Aviv is destroyed, or whether or not thousands upon thousands of civilians are killed, which is how they measure success in Gaza and in Lebanon.
Yeah, I noticed that Elan Levy, the world's only freelance spokesman, was bragging about this and saying, you didn't even kill any civilians, which is darkly hilarious. It's basically like if they put out a press release, it's like, you haven't even molested any of your prisoners of war.
And I'm sorry, this is being echoed by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who said that there were no deaths reported in Israel. Quote, in short, based on what we know at this point, this attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And look, we know that some of those missiles definitely hit Israel. I mean, there's video of it. There's video of missiles landing in Israel. And in terms of I've heard, again, it's very hard to understand conflicting reports about what damage this missile attack may have done at the Air Force bases that they were targeting. I've heard some reports that they may have taken out half of Israel's F-35 fleet. I mean, but it's very hard to tell because Israel is obviously not going to cough up any information about what this attack may or may not have accomplished. But I mean, what are the likelihood that like the Iron Dome was able to intercept something like,
Well,
as they're claiming, 90% of the ballistic missiles that were
it's
fired?
not the Iron Dome is not the anti-ballistic missile system.
Oh,
David
okay.
Sling is the anti-ballistic missile system. Iron Dome is more for like just rockets that follow like a ballistic trajectory and don't cross the Kármán line, like much smaller projectiles.
In either case, David Sling, Iron Dome, virtually none of these missiles seem to have been shot down. What Will is describing with the videos of these missiles that were impacting Israel, it really kind of undersells it. Like, there is one video, I think near Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert, where these missiles are falling and clearly making impact like one after the other every single second. This was a massive security failure by the state of Israel. Back in April, Israel could maybe portray that it was able to withstand Iran's attack because a lot of the projectiles that were fired were slow-moving drones, and the amount of ballistic missiles was far, far smaller. But here, you absolutely cannot make that argument. To make that argument, to assess that it was thwarted, or the new line of argumentation that is from the Pentagon about an hour ago was that the main target was civilians and they hit military bases, I guess by mistake. Like some of them, it was a really odd line of argument.
Yeah. Wow.
Incredible. I wanted to ask you, like unfortunately, like we probably won't really know like the totality of the damage and the true efficacy for another like 20, 30 years. I think it wasn't until 2018 Israel released what Iraq's Scud missiles actually hit inside of Israel. They played all of that very close to the chest, but it was absolutely fucking remarkable. And you never really get to see like short range ballistic missiles deployed in those kinds of numbers. They were reaching like just absurd reentry speeds. Some people said that they might have been like Mach 18, Mach 19 by the time they re-entered. But I was wondering, you mentioned it in passing, the more limited strike with like subsonics and loitering munitions and drones in spring that was largely intercepted, and clearly the intention wasn't the same as this one. I've seen a few people speculate on this, but I don't know if I agree with it, that some people think that attack in spring was a feint to make Israelis believe that was the true extent of Iranian strike capabilities.
I don't think so. I think in all of these cases, the intent is to show that like, the language that President Pezeshkian used with this attack was to show that this was only like a corner of our capabilities. The point is to show that like we can do this now very cheaply, very effectively, and we can increase this without any sweat off our backs. While that specific retaliation measure might be complete for the embassy bombing, for the embassy strike back in April, that's not the be-all, end-all of the war. New lines of engagement are being drawn here. And even if and we can get into this if you have questions about this, the new equation where every single assassination, every single new violation of Iran's interests is violated, it'll be immediately met with the same kind of response. Even if that wasn't the case, clearly we're in a different stage now, where it's no longer all the emphasis on strategic patience, and we'll take this as with a restrained capability. Things are different now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were taking note of like the kind of unprecedented restraint, not unprecedented for Iran, but really unprecedented in recent history for any state being treated this way, shown by Iran in the last year. And a lot of us were wondering, well, like what would it actually take for them to, give Israel a black eye? Well, I guess we found out.
Yeah. With an April, I mean, you cross over a pretty significant line. You hit the embassy. You destroy an embassy complex, which is technically the territory of another country. So that gives you the reasoning. And here, I mean, okay, you hit Hania in Tehran. You get away with that for about 2 months as Iran, restrains itself, is told that you need to wait for ceasefire negotiations. But then you kill Nasrallah, and then you, in addition, kill a very high-ranking brigadier general in the IRGC in that same attack, there's only so much, like, strategic patience eventually runs out. And it runs out when you kill the leader of Hezbollah, when you kill the leader of an important Iranian ally.
You also noted that, like, this is not the apex of Iran's, like, surface-to-surface capabilities. And I did see that noted, that right as things were hitting, they actually have, like, ballistics that are even faster than what they deployed this time, and presumably would have more success not being intercepted by David's sling and have more destructive capability. It's kind of fucking impossible to get inside anyone's head, much less someone who clearly doesn't have, like, any type of plan or anything, like Israel does not appear to. But do you think this has caused any pause amongst at least the Israeli military?
Oh, that's a good question. The thing that I've been mulling over is, like, did this attack, however effective it may have been, did it come too late?
Yeah.
In terms of the fact that the original plan, as I think I discussed on the last time I was on here, the plan that they were mulling was a combined attack by the resistance axis, one that would show the ability of these countries to overcome Israel's defenses. This would be that kind of attack, what you would have seen maybe back in August. But now that it has happened after Nasrallah's death, after the invasion of southern Lebanon has begun, is that deterrent capability that Iran wanted to recreate, is it just finished? Because now Israel has been given even more of a blank check, even more impunity than it had back in July, where there literally seem to be no guardrails about what America is willing to do. I mean, just today, if you were thinking about oil prices, if you're thinking about, well, how much damage you would do, Biden comes out today and journalists ask him about, like, oil prices and if they're thinking about striking oil facilities in Iran, and he's like, "Yeah, we're discussing it."
Yeah, no, I have that here.
Like, oh my God.
I have that here.
There's no, yeah.
Okay, I think this is from the Financial Times. Oil soared to its highest level in more than a month on Thursday as traders speculated that Israel could engage in retaliatory strikes against Iran's oil industry. West Texas Intermediate climbed as much as 5.5% to trade at $74 a barrel after U.S. President Joe Biden told reporters that such a move was under discussion. Asked whether the U.S. would support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, Biden said, "We're in discussion of that." Although in his truncated comments, the U.S. president went on to say, "I think that would be a little anyway."
Okay, good to know.
We could entirely destroy the oil market right before my vice president needs to be reelected, driving up gas prices through the roof. No, it's okay. No, but it's this thing, like, you may have believed even 2 months ago or even a month ago that there might be things that America does not want you to do. Even still, throughout all of this, there might be still things that they don't want you to do. But lately, you get the permission to destroy entire apartment buildings in order to kill the leader of Hezbollah, and you get not even so much as a condemnation, you get just like a stamp of approval from Biden once you do that, once you kill 300 some people. Like, why would you ever believe that anything could ever hurt you? If you strike Iran and Iran strikes you back, then you've got America backing you up every step of the way. So
yeah. I mean, just in, like, the grand scheme of things, it does appear like Israel has no, like, plan. Like, no matter how many people they kill, and they're killing just a horrifying amount and committing horrifying acts against civilian populations, but just in their grand execution of this, how does it ultimately play out? It does kind of appear to me that they don't really know what they're going to do next. And I do kind of think part of that is they anticipated that the Biden administration would behave like most other previous U.S. administrations, in that, they get a very, very broad reign. They get to do a lot of horrible shit, but eventually you get reined in. And that is your off ramp. You get to say, "Oh, we would march all the way to Beirut, but America stopped us." Mm-hmm. I think they've been kind of surprised at how little the Biden administration has done, which is to say they haven't done anything They haven't given them any type of off ramp. So they're just kind of like caught out continuing to do this. And I'm not saying that like this is somehow against their will or not completely their fault. It entirely is, and it is a consequence of a nation with rabies. But it does seem like they counted on there being some kind of like basically their friend holding them back and them going, "Oh, you're fucking lucky."
Oh yeah. No, all I was saying is that I think the dog catching the car sort of analogy is pretty apt here.
Mm-hmm.
They have like a grand plan, as it were, to reshape the Middle East in Israel's image. Talking about like at the UN, Netanyahu talking about there's a plan for the blessing,
Yeah.
and then there's the curse. The idea that the entire Middle East could theoretically be the blessing if they all abandoned their opposition to Israel. And they roughly know how they would do it. You would affect regime change and some sort of regime change in Lebanon, some sort of regime change in Syria if you wanted to. But when it comes to specifics, now you are totally rummaging around in the dark and you have to kind of feel everything out. Like, what can we do? What can we suddenly be able to do now? And that leads you into these wild and crazy avenues that are now being suggested in the Israeli media for the Israeli government to take up, talking about making the entirety of northern Gaza into a military zone where nobody is allowed to live. There are pundits right now advocating that Israel should start striking in Iraq now, start striking Iraqi militias that are firing drones at Israel. Like, everybody's trying to figure out what's, like, even within this realm of impunity, what is next? What can we be able to do? Are there things that we couldn't even conceive of that we weren't able to do, and now we have to figure out plans for that? And that is an extraordinarily dangerous thing for a state to be enabled to do. And they're being given billions and billions of dollars with no strings attached by the Biden administration.
And we talked about hitting Iran's oil facilities. Whether obviously that would spike the price of crude, it would crash the global economy. But Seamus, Iran has stated that if Israel or the United States retaliates against any of its domestic oil production, that they will retaliate by hitting the domestic oil production of Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, and like several. I mean, and once that happens, you're off to the fucking races at that point. But I mean, yeah, this is a real powder keg. It doesn't bear thinking too hard about like how quickly this can become something that is, something that people, we have an idea of what it might look like, but until it happens, most people don't want to countenance the idea of what that might look like. No, I guess I just wanted to think like outside the strategic success or failure of this missile attack. I guess what I was thinking is like more just like symbolically. Like when you see Israel like get attacked, when someone punches them back and hits them back hard, or however hard they may or may not have achieved. I think like a feeling that I have, and I would imagine most of the people around the world have, is like fucking finally, right? And it's just like this idea that like you for a year now, I've woken up every day to see like another account of Israel killing just unrestrained number of people in Gaza, and now in Lebanon. And I think like for most of the people in the world who are, in countries that are far away from where this is happening and whose governments may condemn it, they may support it. But for the people of the world, I think for it just to see Iran or the Houthis or anyone actually fight back against Israel, I think they're like relieving a sense of shame. They're sort of like taking it upon themselves to sort of like do something to like relieve the for some small period of time, relieve the sense of shame that everyone in the world feels for allowing this to occur, and that the knowing that we're not doing anything really to stop it or fight back, and that like Iran is like probably the largest regional actor who is most capable of actually fighting back. And what that will look like, I don't know, but how do you feel about the way in which, like symbolically, what Israel getting their nose bloodied, what that really means?
No, I mean, in Iran, I will temper this by saying that there are a lot of people who were obviously panicked by this development. I mean, it's a ballistic missile attack against Israel, a country that absolutely has the capability to strike back at Iran. People were worried. People were running the gas stations. But there are also crowds of people who are celebrating based on this very idea, the idea that they were finally given a bloody nose after all of this, and that it wasn't just purely symbolic. They hit air bases. They punched holes in hangars. There's damage that the Israeli army is trying to hide. But I will say, just like, regardless of all this discussion about, military effectiveness, how you measure that, all I will point to is the videos that emerge out of places like Khan Yunis, out of places like the Jabalia refugee camp, places in Gaza that have been absolutely decimated by the Israeli military and what they've done. And you see the cheering, you see the applause, you hear the hooting and the whistling, and you see people like reporters from Al Jazeera who have seen nothing but absolute terror for the past almost whole year now. And they say this is the first time in a year that we've seen people happy. That is how I measure the success of this. What does it do? Like, there was something that I think one of the Houthi spokespeople, Mohammed al-Bukhaiti, said. I want to say back in like July when they sent a drone to Tel Aviv. Like, we are not measuring the success of this by specifically like how militarily effective it is. Like, are we physically able to establish a deterrence? Like, this is a battle of morality. Whether it's effective or not, we still have to do it because of how important this is in regards to Palestine. That is how I would measure this.
Yeah, watching especially videos of like kids who are probably like 18, 19 have not really known a life but this, a life under this boot on their neck. Little kids, just people who have been living in hell. And for them to like finally get some satisfaction out of this. I mean, it was like if you could watch the entire Dachau reprisals. It was kind of stunning to watch. But I will say, for pure military strategic success, I have an informal system for figuring out how successful an attack against Israel is or isn't. And you measure it by the posts of online Hasbras. If they're saying things like, this is not normal, and like, this is our life, yeah, they hit something.
Yeah.
When they start acting like they were just having a day at the park and someone launched a missile at them, unbidden, that's when you know something happened.
Oh yeah, there was that one post by the official government account by Israel saying, yeah, like, this is not normal, and then saying like, all of these missiles are meant to kill. It's like, what you guy? That is you. Like, what have you guys been doing this whole time? What? I don't get it. All right.
And then, like, when Israel actually does get punched and punched hard, then of course in the last couple of days we've seen a return of the concept of international law and the crime of aggression, and also, the Mossad headquarters is in a heavily civilian area. How dare they attack it? It blinkers the imagination.
No, and there was also, in addition to that, which is, I think I know the CNN bit you're referring to with Jim Scudio, which is, all right, spell it out, whatever. But there were also, when they questioned this to Matthew Miller, our favorite smirking.
Our guy, that's my guy.
They questioned him, like, he was saying this was unprovoked. Obviously, he said it was unprovoked. And when somebody brought up the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, he said, "Oh, that happened weeks ago."
Oh, that's old shit.
Like,
don't bring it up.
Yeah, why are you bringing up old shit?
It only happened weeks ago.
Like, October 7th has been the justification for all of this, and that happened almost a year ago. And there were also Congress people who were talking about how great Nasrallah being killed was because that was justice for the Marines who were killed back in 1988. Like, how are we measuring this? Where suddenly there's a time scale where if you go over it, it's like, you know what? Bygones, bygones. That's not how it fucking works. That's never how it's worked. You can't even say this with a straight face because you immediately, like, dog, they bombed Tehran. Did you think that this was going to, like, go over well with people?
This is the insane standard where, like, Israel can assassinate someone in Iran attack their consulate in a foreign country, and then if Iran responds militarily in any way, as any other country would, as we're told over and over again when it comes to Israel's self-defense, quote unquote, and then they do it, and they're like, oh, well, that's a war crime. This is terror. This is aggression. These missiles are intended to kill people. They're trying to kill people in a war. That this is not normal. This is not okay. And it's just like, or when I hear accounts are like, every Israeli right now are you're sheltering in a, they're cowering in a bomb shelter. This is not normal. It's just sort of like, what do you think you've been doing in more or less in front of the entire world for the last year? And like, again, whether it's now a possibility of a war with Iran, we'll talk in a second. Israel is invading Lebanon at this moment. It bears stating that the only reason all of this is happening is because the United States is allowing our client state and ally to pursue unrestrained war against a captive civilian population. Like, and I like in the U.S. like the U.S. state planners, they keep saying that like, oh, like we need to separate these conflicts, or just like, we need to like drive a wedge between Gaza and all these other wars we're fighting. But like, it's only happening because they did what they're doing to Gaza in the first place. And like the people like Nasrallah before he was assassinated are like, they've made it pretty clear that like, no, like Gaza is the issue. Like, that's why we're launching rockets into northern Israel, is because of what you're doing in Gaza. And like, and there are some accounts that like that Nasrallah was assassinated because of his stance on the ceasefire.
Not for nothing, the Israeli strike that killed Hananea, the assassination of Hananea, that was not their first strike inside of Iran, where they killed someone who, previous assumptions would dictate that maybe they don't fucking go inside the country to assassinate if they don't want this to happen. You don't you have to go back like 3 or 4 years to find that instance of them sending that it was like an automotive drone that had
you're talking about Fakhrizadeh. Yeah, no, it was the turret thing. It was weird. Yeah,
if it's okay for someone else to kill Nasrallah because of the attack on the Marines in '83, then where does that leave something that happened in fucking 2020?
No, the only people who are allowed to, abide by international law, to invoke international law, are the United States. When somebody else talks about their responsibility to protect, the backbone of humanitarian intervention throughout, since Kosovo, suddenly it's about unprovoked war. Suddenly it's about, oh, you're blowing up the entire region. Well, dog, people would say, Hezbollah would say, the Houthi would say, well, we're trying to abide by the conventions that you guys yourselves written, that you wrote it. You conjured up this entire thing. We're trying to follow it. And now you've gotten to this position in which nobody in the Middle East believes anything that the State Department has to say, that the United States has to say. There is a generational break in the perception of the United States and the people of the Middle East, far greater than existed after the Iraq War, I think. I don't even know a time in which this could be washed off.
Yeah, there obviously is like no one has like a monopoly on horrible acts committed by the U.S. or its allies in the Middle East. But just as far as like, can you believe anything that this administration or this government says? Like, there is no even attempt at any type of propriety. I mean, which is, aren't these the norms, people? Aren't these the people that love fucking norms? Wasn't that what the 2020 election was entirely about? Norms?
No, well, they've abandoned. I mean, this is a larger domestic politics thing, but every single norm that we were obsessed with protecting back in like 2016, 2020, that's all gone out the fucking window. Everything has to immediately lurch right. All that stuff about immigration is out the window. Nobody gives a shit about that anymore. Now they're praising Biden and Kamala Harris for enforcing the tightest border security that's ever existed. No, it's there is a silent acknowledgement here that norms can no longer be afforded to exist. Norms got us into a very bad position. We're now out on our asses trying to defend ourselves. Now we have to continuously obfuscate. Now we have to, I guess, fall back on the barest of bones of international law justifications to get where we are.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the norm, I guess, here is that it is only people who attack Israel that are escalating this conflict. Like when
that still holds.
And like that's the thing is like Israel can blow up every cell phone and pager in Lebanon. It can level a housing block full of hundreds of people to kill one guy. None of those are that's actually escalation to de-escalate. But when Iran fires a volley of ballistic missiles, they're escalating this conflict. Hezbollah is escalating this conflict by killing the Israeli soldiers that are invading their country.
No, everybody complained about the fact that, people were always saying, like, this all started on October 7th. And then people had to remind them that this occupation of the Gaza Strip had been going on for decades at this point. But now you see this whole thing where history now starts on September 30th, where these ballistic missiles came out of the sky while Israel was doing its own counterterrorism operations in Lebanon and Gaza. Or really, that's not even mentioned too much. So now this is entirely unprovoked. There are this unchecked aggression from Iran, the country that desires the complete annihilation of the Jewish people, the only Jewish state in the entire world. And this immense evil needs to be countered. The Iranian people, the noble Iranian people, as Netanyahu had said in that one message in English, they need to be freed. Iran will be free much sooner than many people think. And Israel needs to be supported in this measure. The entire free world needs to be behind them. Like, that norm still remains, but it's become Flanderized almost. Like, there used to be, by people, even by the George Bush administration, there used to be parameters that Israel was not supposed to get out of. They couldn't kill too many civilians in the operations that they would do. They had to at least say that they were going with some sort of two-state solution, but otherwise they can do mostly what they wanted. Now, supporting Israel has become this completely all-encompassing form that overcomes and just swallows up every other thing that the United States is involved with. Nothing can come above that, not laws, not courts, no international standards of any kind. If it interferes with that, then the whole thing comes apart. And it's become like this linchpin of the entire international order.
And as far as like our domestic political scene here in the presidential election, I see this and I'm just thinking, like, is Joe Biden trying to get Kamala Harris to lose? Like, I think he may be at this point. I think he probably can't stand the fact that she's running for president and not him. And it's just like, but for Kamala herself, she's aiding and abetting this because, like, all of her statements this past week, her national security advisor put out a statement attacking Donald Trump for not supporting Israel as much as they are in their attacks on Lebanon.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. There were, I saw
he,
that. Yeah, they were trying to. I think this was during the DNC. I want to say this was in the platform. They were critical of Trump for not hitting back after the Iranian attack on the Al Asad air base in 2020, leaving out the fact that retaliation had come after Trump had assassinated Qasem Soleimani, one of the top commanders of a sovereign state's military. The idea being that Trump is obviously weak on all sorts of things, Russia, blah, 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 but they're also weak against Israel's enemies. He gives them too much leeway. We, the Democrats, would create the most lethal army in the world. We'll counter Iran better than he did. We'll be more right-wing on this issue. And it's
Donald
bad.
Trump,
It's fucking insane.
Donald Trump called Hassan Nasrallah, quote, very smart and a beautiful man. It's like it's shit like that. And again, what there's an election in like a month, and like they are. I mean, like I said, they're now. I mean, I'm just going to turn here to the invasion of Lebanon, and this is from Politico from this week. Headline: U.S. officials quietly backed Israel's military push against Hezbollah. Senior White House figures privately told Israel that the U.S. would support its decision to ramp up military pressure against Hezbollah, even as the Biden administration publicly urged the Israeli government in recent weeks to curtail its strikes, according to American and Israeli officials. Presidential advisor Amos Hochstein and Brett McGurk, the White House coordinator for the Middle East, told Israeli officials in recent weeks that the U.S. agreed with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's broad strategy to shift Israel's military focus to the north against Hezbollah in order to convince the group to engage in diplomatic talks to end the conflict, the officials told Politico. So, like, once again, it's like, who is actually in charge? I keep hearing this asshole Brett McGurk, Dirt McGurk.
Always punch low.
Okay.
That means below the waist.
Right.
Get him in the legs or in the crotch. Do stuff like that.
Do you think that's dirty fighting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. But there's nothing wrong with dirty fighting.
Really?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Because fighting is wrong. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to fight, you're already wrong.
Yeah.
So if you're going to dirty, you might as well dirty fight.
Yeah.
Because you're already there.
Yeah.
You're already at the party.
Right.
And like, what are they doing here? Like, this is, it's a limited ground, like the Israeli troop movements across the border. It's like, yeah, that's called an invasion. They're invading southern Lebanon right now.
This is just in pure, like, domestic politics terms, just electorally, not morally. I think we all know what this is morally, but just electorally doing this, it is the equivalent to if Jimmy Carter in October of 1980 had called Iran and been like, could you kill like half the hostages? Blame me for it. But you brought up McGurk. I think like any other country, someone who had fucked up as bad as repeatedly and just in the same way as McGurk always had, they would be, forget even being employed like McGurk still is and probably will be in future Republican administrations as well as Democratic ones. In a halfway normal country, Brett McGurk would be forced to be a dunk tank clown for the rest of his life at gunpoint. Brett McGurk would be sent to buffoon's prison. Like just someone who had fucked up this bad. He would have to do pratfalls in front of the president until he died. But they're just going to keep having this guy do the exact same fucking job that he's been doing for like 16 fucking years. And he seems to get worse at it every year.
I remember somebody, I really hope this is not me just making something up out of thin air, but I remember something about how Biden saw him as like a son surrogate. I remember reading this.
Oh my God. Fuck off, you weepy Irish dick of this. Every other man he meets under the age of 70, you're like my son. Oh my God. Take a fucking Zoloft, you Nick.
Look. I'll ignore the usage of the M word.
Sorry.
It's what I will say is that McGurk, his line of thinking is it's shocking. I mean, it's not necessarily too shocking, but it's shocking how long this has persisted. This idea, I think, spearheaded by him, that the key to peace is getting a ceasefire, but then entrenching it with a Saudi Arabia-Israel peace deal, ignoring the fact that, one, the idea that Palestine is being de-emphasized was what drove October 7th. So I don't know how that would work out very well. But also this idea that Saudi Arabia in its current form would be gung-ho now on doing a peace deal with Israel. Even though MBS, has been essentially quoted as saying, I don't give a shit about Palestine, which I believe from him.
Yeah.
But, the Saudi diplomatic corps is more shrewd than he is on this issue and understands how it looks to the population, which is still broadly anti-Israel and has gotten more anti-Israel as the war against Gaza has gone on. No, it's a immense kind of myopia where you were already going to do something before October 7th. So if you just forcibly pull everything back into place, we can reestablish the status quo. And
Abraham Accords, baby. Abraham Accords. We're going back to the once Israel gets done with Iran and Lebanon, then we'll go back to the Abraham Accords. Everything will be normal and fine. And sorry, just one more thing from that Politico piece here. It says,
but that is what's sort of so incredible about this. When the Abraham Accords were linked, ending the brutal decades-long war between the UAE and Israel that claimed millions of lives. We're all glad to see that one done with. Thank God, peace in our lifetime. it was, roundly mocked by liberals, by Democrats, by just the general anti-Trump sphere, because like it is it's just like codifying like back channels and like tacit alliances that have existed in many forms and across like many different theaters in the Middle East for like over a decade.
Or it was just extortion in Sudan's case. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But like it is now like the fulcrum of Biden's Middle East policy. That's it. You're exactly right. That it is just they want to do a big Abraham Accord. And like, I don't think that any fucking Saudi monarch has given a shit about Palestine since King Faisal. That he was the last one who gave a solitary shit about any of this. But like you just, even as an incredibly powerful monarchy, you need you can't have your populace completely fucking despising you or thinking that you're weak on this. It's just a non-starter right now.
And the UAE can do this kind of thing because 90% of its population are non-citizens. So, the Arab population still disapproving of Israel is not going to really make a huge amount of a difference. But in Saudi Arabia's case, contrary to whatever belief you might have, they do have a large Arab population, one with a lot of wealth, one with a lot of influence, and they are not friendly to Israel. Even if MBS and King Salman are unelected leaders like the other people who did the Abraham Accords, curiously, they had no input from the national populace. They're not going to be behind this. Even if they think, some sort of defense pact with the U.S. might be beneficial, maybe if they fucking hate Iran, to do it after all of this, to be like next year, you guys are going to be able to take a direct flight from Tel Aviv to Riyadh. How cool is that? This is not like if you're a Saudi businessman, you already have relationships with Israeli companies. That's not really a huge thing. The only reason you would care about this is because you wanted some sort of like outward public political easing of tensions, the ending of that cold conflict. But that's not like, it's like, this is of very little worth to you. As a Saudi, it is only of worth to you if you're in the Biden administration and you truly, honestly think that this is going to solve the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, to that point, Séamus, just further in this Politico article, we get to this here. Some in the administration say that what looks like a rift is just the United States pursuing multiple routes at once. Both things can be true. The U.S. can want diplomacy and support Israel's larger goals against Hezbollah, a senior U.S. official said. There's clearly a line that the administration is towing. It's just not clear what that line is. Behind the scenes...
What do you mean? You're saying that there's multiple lines, and you say you don't know what they are?
Well, no, both things can be true. The U.S. can oppose a war, a broader regional war that brings in Iran and Lebanon, but also pursue exactly that at the same time. We can pursue both routes, fomenting war and trying to prevent one. And sorry, it goes on here. It says here, behind the scenes, Hochstein, McGurk, and other top U.S. national security officials are describing Israel's Lebanon operations as a history-defining moment, one that will reshape the Middle East for the better for years to come. The thinking goes, Israel has obliterated Hezbollah's top command structure in Lebanon, severely undercutting the group's capabilities, and weakened Iran, which used Hezbollah as a proxy and power projector. The internal administration division seems to have dissipated somewhat in recent days, with top U.S. officials convening Monday at the White House with President Joe Biden to discuss the situation on the ground. Most agreed that the conflict, while fragile, could offer an opportunity to reduce Iran's influence in Lebanon and the region. Now, I think this has to be I think of this in the context of the Harris Walz campaign proudly touting the endorsement of Dick Cheney for their ticket. And to me, when it says actually this operation could reshape the region for the better for years to come. This to me is just a Democratic administration pursuing what has been the neocon dream for a final conflict that will redraw the borders, settle all family accounts, and then just remove any resistance to Israel in the region. And that means Iran and Lebanon and Hezbollah, essentially, to just, clear the decks, have a true war that will remove all of Israel's enemies and redraw the borders of the Israeli state. And like I said, that was, I think, basically Dick Cheney and George W. Bush's hope for the Iraq War that they didn't achieve with the Iraq War. But now I think these same people, they see the same opportunity to do what has been, I think, their dream for years now, which is regime change in Iran.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for one thing, for any history buffs among you, you might want to look up the term Endsieg. It's a very cool thing that the Germans thought up of that might sound a bit similar to this. Look, when Iraq failed, essentially, when the U.S. lost the Iraq War, lost the Afghan War, there was an opportunity that was obviously being dashed. But Israel presents a new opportunity, a somewhat new opportunity, in that it is a state that has far more protections around criticizing it than the United States does. Criticizing it still gives you accusations of being anti-Semitic, of being against Judaism, of being entrenched with the enemies of the world, like Iran. But simultaneously, you are now in a much more volatile position in which you have reduced control over what the army you are supporting can do. They constantly need more support. It's a much more tenuous network. And I hate to say this, because I know that there are people who are maybe hoping that this might be what Politico was saying, the new opportunity to reduce Iranian influence in Lebanon. They've tried to kill Hezbollah secretary generals before Nasrallah, back in 92. After that, Hezbollah's influence increased, its strength increased, and now it can take on Israel in toe-to-toe, any battle it can. In Iran's case, they're getting more irreligious, but they are not getting less anti-American.
Yeah.
There's been nothing in the, they might have different opinions about Islamic Republic governance, but they are not getting hugely pro-Israel anytime soon.
One does not necessarily need to believe in God to understand that America is indeed the great Satan.
That's right.
The whole thing of like the administration like falling over backwards and at the behest of Israel trying to make Abraham Accords too is like, this is a very tertiary thing, but like it is in the light of all the Hasbara that's like, oh, try being fucking gay in Gaza, they'll cut your head off. Is it the only countries in the region that have the most laws on the books against that type of thing are the only ones that Israel actually wants to be friends with. Yeah. Israel wants to be friends with the nations that have the most executioners out of anyone on earth. That has always driven me crazy. Just like, this idea, like, they always go to beheading. I get it's a very like post 9/11 thing where it's like, oh, beheading is the Muslim way to kill people, and they all do it. But like, it does not withstand like a second of scrutiny when you look at Israel's actual, allies, tacit or otherwise, in the region.
Who chops more heads than Saudi Arabia? That's their official death penalty.
Yeah, and they're completely They don't have any fucking problem with that.
Look, just to better round out what I was saying about like the tide of history, I guess, going toward Israel in some way. There's an idea prominent within these circles that like if like all of these populations in Lebanon, in Iran, wherever, they are just waiting to be exposed to the liberal light of Israel. That the idea that if they are given the opportunity to be free, to be to be given, I don't know, gay pride parades and so on and so forth, that they'll break with Iran, they'll break with Hezbollah, they'll embrace America, so on and so forth. All I will say is that I knew a lot of gay people, and I knew trans people in Lebanon. Does anyone want to maybe like take a guess as to like what side they were going for?
Yeah.
Like out of all of this, there were so many people who were otherwise, they were critical of Hezbollah on matters of gay rights. They had criticisms of religious authorities, but when it came to fighting Israel, what Israel represents, there was no disagreement. Like everybody sees this for what it is, and it is impossible for it is a very difficult proposition to say to these people that, hey, we're bombing you. hey, we've said over and over again that we want to annihilate your country, but maybe if you just give us a chance, maybe you ever be able to get a better deal out of this. It's like, no, idiot. We see what you're saying. People see what you're saying. They can make decisions for themselves, and they're able to make. I know that you're, as the state of Israel, are not able to conceive of Arabs having complicated opinions, but people are able to figure out the situation and what's on the other side waiting for them.
I thought that maybe this type of idiotic thinking, that at least maybe people would be too ashamed to openly put it in such terms after the Iraq War. I don't know why I assume that. But there is the general assumption among the US security state is that if we can just get a million Lebanese to watch the show Schitt's Creek, they'll they'll welcome Israel as liberators. Just any Western culture, they've never seen it before. They have never seen a show. They've never seen any. Oh, they all they have are oral Islamic traditions because they can't depict images. There are no images in Lebanon even. And if they just see that, or the don't trust the bitch in Apartment 23 if things are really tough, they'll go, oh my God, what have we been missing out on?
No, all these places Yemen, Iran. I know this is maybe a hot take. All these places, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, they all have access to the internet.
Yeah.
They've been on the internet for a while, and they see clips from Israeli media that are translated into Arabic. They see what Israelis speak about them. They see what they talk about them. This isn't how it was maybe in the 1980s. And even that might be a bit, stretching it, where there was a clear separation between Israeli PR and its actual conduct, where maybe you couldn't quite see what was on the other side. And you could maybe make the argument that, well, maybe this Israeli invasion won't be too bad. But that all those opportunities, however extraordinarily slim in their time, do not exist now. The PR machine that Israel has constructed has never been in worse shape, but it has also never produced as much.
Yeah. That is a great way to put it. And I think that there is an analogous degeneration of the Israeli PR state that it's sort of an analog for their actual military. With the military, we see this thing that is, it is a unavoidable truth for every military in history. Any military that changes its focus from the traditional focuses of a military to exclusively, internal repression and jackboot shit within its own borders loses its ability and kind of the individual willingness of soldiers to actually fight an armed enemy. You cannot go in one direction without greatly diminishing the capacities of the other. And similarly, with the Israeli PR state, as it's become more of a third rail to even suggest that we condition weapons, much less stop sending them, as unified as the major parties in America have become with their position on Israel, and since their output has been concentrated exclusively towards getting people fired or in trouble or just screaming at people that they're fucking Nazis, like they did with Corbyn. Once it shifted to that, which is the PR equivalent of an army geared towards control and repression, they lost any, ability to, have any subtlety or really any efficacy in their propaganda as far as appealing to the uninitiated. As far as appealing to people like Michael Rappaport, who are already going to be down for anything, no matter what. Yeah, it's like anything where you just pump up your base now. But anyone who wasn't previously on their side sees Israel's endless parade of crying bald men, saying that Palestinians can reproduce asexually, and it's what the fuck is this?
this is a good segue to my the reading series for the week. If you gentlemen want to have a little fun at the end of the episode, in terms of talking about the increasingly strained efforts at Israeli PR, I think we're seeing a very good example of that right now, and I think a very interesting one with the reemergence of American author Ta-Nehisi Coates and his new book out right now. And in that book, I mean, the thing that's gotten is one of the chapters in it is he talks about his experience going to the occupied territories and stating flat out that Israel is a ethno-supremacist apartheid state, and that he is talking in the terms of the American experience of civil rights. He is applying the same standards that everyone in America hold to be true to Israel. And because of the prominence that he has gained for himself, or been raised up by this same largely liberal media to be the voice of truth on the history of racism in America, is now applying those same standards to the racist ethno-supremacist apartheid state of Israel. And because of his position, he can't just be ignored. He has to be contained or confronted in some way. And I'd just like to talk about a couple examples of those efforts to contain and sort of neutralize the message that he's talking about here. Specifically, the appearance he did on CBS Sunday Morning with that guy, Tony Dokupil.
And so then I found myself wondering, why does Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I've known for a long time, read his work for a long time, very talented, smart guy, leave out so much? Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel, in any condition, has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media.
Oh,
You saw that?
Yeah. For people who don't know, Tony Doki Panic or whatever is it. This is one of the most baffling figures in American media. He is the son of a successful his father was a successful Czech version of James Franco in Pineapple Express. He was the weed dealer that forces you to watch the entire movie with him. And he sent Tony Doki Literature Club to college, where he met his first wife, who now lives in Israel with their two children. Tony then married another Jewish woman, sensing a pattern here. And he wrote an article about how, though he was circumcised at birth, he let a reform Moyle samurai perform a bloodletting ritual so he could marry his wife.
That is indeed the article I'm going to discuss here. This is Tony Dokupil, My Adult Circumcision, How I Made the Cut for My New Religion. And now, keep in mind, this was the guy that clearly got the contract to, he was the guy who was appointed that you got to counter the Ta-Nehisi Coates guy. And in that CBS Sunday Morning interview, it was pretty hilarious because he was just your book, you don't give any voice to Israelis. How come you're not giving the Israeli point of view on how they're in such a dangerous neighborhood and the rocket attacks, blah, blah, blah. And I think he very calmly and ably just been well, if you want that perspective, you can literally find it everywhere else in the media.
Yeah.
But this idea that if you give voice to the Palestinian point of view, you always have to justify yourself, and then justify yourself in the terms of why this isn't anti-Semitic. And that's what they got here. But this is, I thought it was interesting. The Tony Dokupil, his article on adult circumcision, he writes, I understand the world doesn't usually think much about adult male circumcision. It's like having a chat about it's like having a chat about
Great start.
It's like having a chat about ball trampling or the Pentagon's Kevlar underwear. Even on the covered wagon side of the circumcision wars, where people fight for the foreskins of baby boys, no one wants to talk about grown men getting their corn shucked. Take it to Craigslist, please. I get all this and so much more. And yet, as someone who knows the sting of this particular ritual, who volunteered for it, in fact, and signed his own check to the part-time reaper who did the job, I have to say, it's not so bad. There's no need for any of us to go on treating our junk like our father-in-law's scratch-free Ferrari. It's much tougher than you think.
Felix, if you want to, I have something, but please go ahead.
I just wanted to just very quickly say that, if Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's to the liberal media, he is like Anton Chigurh. They're like, oh my God, this is fucking terrifying. He's coming out against Israel. This guy's like, he's the best. What the fuck do we do? And him being anti-Chagard, that makes it, Tony, who they sent to take him out, he's Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson,
No Country for Old Men. They were like, who's the best guy we have to take out Ta-Nehisi Coates? Bring me the guy who got his his dick filleted, I guess. Is that what happened to him?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. When I read the article, I was like, wow, this guy got circumcised as an adult. But as the article will make clear eventually, he was circumcised at birth. So I don't understand what he's bragging about here. It's like the cut's been made. So basically, he hired a freelance mohel to just basically kind of like poke his dick or something in an official bloodletting ceremony.
Look, there's something about what he mentioned at the very first thing where he talked about ball trampling. That I think was very choice. Like, why do you know about this, one? And two, maybe this just represents something about my own sensibilities. But I don't care what faith I would be a part of, you would be a part of. I am not, if I am conscious, you are not getting a blade anywhere near.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's just a little drop of blood. No. Don't do it. But okay, fine. That's your thing. That's your thing.
That is sort of the problem. I was talking about this with Hassan yesterday, that like this is the generational trap of circumcision, is that like if I have a son one day, it's like obviously like in my conscious mind, in my moral mind, it's like, well, like I don't, that's a fucked up choice for me to make for you. Like, Jesus, I don't want to do that. But then you think about the actual logistics and the practicality of it. And it's like, I don't know how to wash an uncircumcised dick. And like, what do I do? Do I invite an uncircumcised friend over and have him show me?
Yeah,
I can't have him show.
You use soap.
But
use soap.
I have
that's easy.
Yeah, but there's like a whole like part to it. Like
it's a lot easier than you think.
It's like winterizing a pool. It's so much work. It's so hard.
It's really not.
All right.
To go with Tony Goku Pill, he writes here, I came to this knowledge on the way to the altar of all places. I was engaged to a nice Jewish girl, taking some free conversion classes at a big progressive Manhattan synagogue. I wanted to learn about something that mattered to her, and the more I learned, the more it mattered to me, too. This wasn't a fur coat in the summer kind of congregation. It was part of the reform movement, only game for the high holidays, mostly casual about pork, always down with gay female rabbis. When one of my own rabbis, gay, female in parentheses, slipped me the number of a mohel, a professional snipper, I laughed it off. Classic Jewish humor. But no. Medically speaking, I was already circumcised along with most of the other babies born in America in the 80s. But that's no good for God. I needed a hatafat dam brit, a drawing of blood. To remain uncut, I was told, is to remain spiritually cut off from the Jewish people. That's the idea of the covenant. He goes on to say, that's how I found myself biblically nude in a kind of spiritual locker room, a shower space in a converted brownstone, waiting on a man with a razor.
I don't like how much joy he's taking in describing this, so please continue.
He goes, the surroundings were civilized, more university club than Russian bathhouse. Blue and black tile ran along the floors and climbed the walls. A minty scent hung in the air. But all noise had already washed away in the roar of my thoughts. I was 12 when Lorena Bobbitt cut her husband down to the size of an elevator button, igniting prurience and anger. It was hard to get to 7th grade in the morning without encountering sliced soda jokes and love hurts humor. It all made the very idea of external genitalia seem, well, kind of crazy. All of it so fundamentally exposed. When the mohel arrived, he looked, I'm sorry to say, like Danny DeVito in Curls. We stood in silence. I opened my towel. Hello, groin. He opened a shaving bag with glinting instruments. Hello, knife. My mohel produced a pen-sized lance, which he wielded ever so gently, like Lady Grantham with a paring knife. He sliced, squeezed, dripped, and was done. The whole transaction was over in seconds, long before I could scream or faint or decide if I liked it. Instead, I felt the way I remember feeling as a child when, rising early, I could watch light fill the woods behind my house, revealing nothing at all scary. When the mohel finally spoke, he spoke in Hebrew, and I couldn't make out a word of it. But I had the feeling that the substance of his words was important, and that if I could understand him, I would be in possession of something profound, a message from God. It's only a penis. That's the piece there. But that is
We should all know less about each other.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Okay. All right.
But I mean, I simply have to go around to the idea that like of the blatant cap in this article, the idea that like my adult circumcision. No, you did not get an adult circumcision, and if you did, there's no way you would have gone through with it for your nice Jewish fiance or anything. There is no way that like you could actually count into actually being circumcised as an adult, nor would any human being.
Yeah. I think I've made this point like 3 or 4 times now, but like the way that he's describing this throughout the piece, you can tell that he's trying to like be humorous, trying to like be how crazy absurd is the situation. But man, does this seem like he's describing like he's trying to hide this fetish that he has. It's really bothering me. I don't know if this is, am I crazy? Like,
he found the only reformed temple on earth where it's like you could clearly see why they schismed away from another group. They were both like, okay, we like it when the rabbi is a woman who plays an acoustic guitar. We love interfaith dinners. We don't really care about kosher. Okay, circumcision, good for Jews, but if you convert, whatever's fine. And then whoever founded this temple was like, have you ever read Lone Wolf and Cub? What if we did that ceremony, but specifically to Czech Americans who convert to Judaism 2 times for their wives?
I'm interested in the economics of a freelance moil. Is this something
He's the lone wolf. He's the Ronin, just wandering with his blade, free from his feudal daimyo lord.
I love that he complained about the moil looking like Danny DeVito because it's sort of like porn where you're like, well, I'm not gay, but I want the guy to have a big dick. I'm not gay, but I want my moil to at least be handsome. Like, is that so much to ask for?
God, man, they gotta look. There's only one reason why these freaks. These are the only people that are willing to like go out and interview Ta-Nehisi Coates and essentially tell him off and be like, "Oh no, you're the weird one in the situation, man.
Yeah,
you're the fucking weirdo. No, this is out in the open, man. We can see it. You published this in, I assume, a somewhat reputable publication. Whatever.
Yeah, indeed. This was the New Statesman or something. Yeah, it was in the New Statesman.
You can pitch anything to that fucking paper. All right.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
But, as it relates to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and like, I think the problem that he's presenting now for the Israeli and American PR machine is that, like, you can tell in the critiques of him that have been offered, for instance, in the pages of The Atlantic, where like they're accusing him of seeking moral purity at the expense of nuance and complexity. And I think the danger here is that he is, like I said, speaking in the terms of the American civil rights movement, which is legible and, heralded by most Americans. But he is saying that, like, no, this is simple. And it's like either apartheid is right or it's wrong. And you don't need to like speak 3 different languages or have lived there, or like all you need to do is just visit the occupied territories if you have any doubt of what I'm talking about. Any doubt.
No.
And I think that is a very the shield of this idea that like there's this endlessly receding horizon of nuance and complexity, which can always be mustered to like counter the argument that Israel is an apartheid state. Because like, once you admit that, either you have to deny it outright and say like, no, none of that stuff is happening. There's no like 2-tiered legal and political system that's based on, Judaism. Are you a Jew or not? But like, they can't really do that. But instead they have to like I said, always make a plea for some sort of imagined complexity that's being lost in this issue that like you don't really understand, or that like in pursuing moral clarity, you are eschewing nuance or reason or complexity.
There's something that Coates talked about. I want to say on Jon Stewart.
Yeah, he was just on Jon Stewart. He was just on the Daily Show.
Jon Stewart, or maybe it was on Chris Hayes, where he brings up the fact that like victims and victimizers are ever flowing. Like people who are victimized are entirely capable of, making other people into victims. So while it's not like he is, not understanding the complexity of the situation. over and over again in interviews, Coates talks about the fact that, like, he understands why Zionism came into being, why the severity of their proposed solutions came into being, the immense amount of persecution that Jews suffered, in so many different places around the world. But that complexity does not let you off the hook.
Yeah.
Like, there can be a million different explanations for why you think a certain way, but at the end of the day,
the word nuance is just like hitting the emergency escape hatch. Like emergency
Yeah.
nuance, you just hit that word, you just say that word, and that somehow gets you out of the the moral contradiction and the impasse of morally speaking that you arrive at having to defend this shit.
And even if we are accepting the argument that, okay, there's so much complexity and nuance to the situation that you have to excuse everything that Israel does. I mean, be honest with yourself. Do you think that the Palestinians don't have complex and nuanced explanations for why they do certain things? Do you not have the Arabs have complex and nuanced histories that they draw from? The only true explanation for why you would think this, and only propose that Jews and Judaism and Israel has a complex and nuanced history and nobody else does, is if you truly and honestly believe that Jewish people are exceptional in a way that it has to be enforced through supremacy.
Yeah.
And that is not something that you, unless you are a hardline Zionist, are going to be willing to admit to yourself. You have to dress it up in all of these sort of liberal platitudes about, like, heard voices and we need to listen to the voices of the oppressed. Meanwhile, you are endorsing one of the most right-wing states currently existing on the planet.
It's like, if the Palestinian point of view, or an Arab journalist or pundit is allowed to be interviewed on American television, American or British television, it is only in the context where they are on a panel with like 4 other people who are screaming at them the entire time. Whereas if any representative of the Israeli government or anyone who is pro-Zionist, they get a one-on-one interview to just like speak their truth, have their voice be heard, and that their narrative is never asked to justify itself in the same way that the perspectives of people who have borne a history different than like the Israeli one or have been like victimized by it always have to like beg for some sort of like a tone for what they're for that. They can offer a point, but then they are cajoled to atone for it and their point of view about like, well, what about the families in bomb shelters hiding from rockets right now? Why didn't you when you were visiting the occupied territories, like why didn't you take any time to interview the settlers who are like they have their own history and feelings as well?
I mean, ultimately, this is the root of this central freakout. Like when, Jesus Christ, I've already forgot his name. Tom Dookie, what the fuck is his name?
Doku Pill.
Doku Pill. When Doku Pill is essentially arguing to Coates on CBS that the Palestinians deserve their own oppression, that they deserve everything that has come to them.
Not only that, but he also in that interview basically kind of made clear that he was like, you're attacking the foundations of Israel. And what he was saying is like apartheid is wrong. So he's basically kind of admitting that the foundation of Israeli society is racial apartheid.
Yeah, I mean, this is the root of the freakout, right? The idea being that they have been able to cover what Zionism, what the state of Israel actually does, what it represents, and now that it has been flung so publicly in front of the world that there is no way to truly escape it unless you only consume like NBC. It's a major source of concern, of worry that, not only, speaking pretty cynically, that you no longer have this monopoly on information, that you no longer can operate this PR machine cleanly, quietly, but also, like, if you are an honest believer and you see all this, like, you're brushing up against acknowledging something to yourself. If you are truly an honest believer in Israel, but also you are a liberal at heart, that this pablum about Israel being a democracy that respects its minorities and values the opinions of all of its citizens is a fundamentally bunk proposition, and that you have been supporting a state that is now engaged in a genocide against Arabs and is poised to expand that genocide potentially into Lebanon. That is a very scary thing to be on the precipice of admitting to oneself. And I think there are a lot of Americans who have already made that leap very early on. And I think there are also a lot of people who are still trying to lie to themselves about what they actually are supporting.
I think that sums it up, and I think we can leave it there for today, gentlemen. Chris, once again, Matt Christman's Spanish Civil War, available for pre-order at chapotraphouse.store, as are tickets for our Election Eve show with E1 in Los Angeles. So please check that out. Please buy the book, and we hope to see you in L.A.
Also, myself, Séamus, and Felix will all be appearing at a fundraiser for Gaza and Lebanon, hosted this Saturday at Makeout Music in Los Angeles. I will put ticket links to that. I assume it's probably close to selling out. I don't know, maybe even by the time I put this up, but I'll put links to that as well. Should be a fun party.
All right, everybody. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.